Great. All right, so I call to order the Board of Supervisors preliminary budget meeting on Friday, November 5th, 2021 at 1:08 p.m. In attendance is 4 of the board members, Nancy, Donna, John, and myself. And we have 3 members of the residents. First, we start with the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So first, we need to make an announcement that we held an executive session on October 29th to discuss our current office structure, personnel, and some other legal issues. I believe 2 of those topics will be discussed today, so the public is aware of what we talked about and finalized. Before we move on to the first agenda item, which is discussing the preliminary budget, we can open up for public comments. Any comments from the public? Right. Thank you very much. So without further ado, we can move on to our first agenda item. I think, John, you wanted to comment before we begin.
I just want to outline the task because we don't have a lot of time, so I want to make sure everybody understood what's required. The budget needs to be complete by November 17th, which is our next normal board. That's only 13 days from now, so we don't have a lot of time. In that board meeting, November 17th, we could make some minor corrections. They have to be very minor, and I'll explain why. Because shortly after that meeting, we have to advertise the budget to the public. Once it gets advertised, then there's really not anything we can do. So that gets advertised to the public through some advertising media we typically use. And we adopt the final budget in the December board meeting, which is December 15th. So that's the task. So the important thing is we only have 13 days from today to the next board meeting. So I think the task is manageable, but we need to be very focused on it. So I can go on or whatever you want to do. I just got.
Well, Mary's going to start. Mary, can you hear us? Mary?
I can hear you. I had the meeting written down for 3 o'clock. I checked it last night before I went to bed. I don't know how I wrote that down, but I had 3 p.m.
Are you able to join us now?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. Do you want to make any comments before we get started? I mean, I don't even know how we want to manage this.
I just heard the end of what John was saying and basically giving us a rundown on how many days we have and when we have to do the final adoption. And so I heard the tail end of that from John.
Gary, let me just go over it again because it's an important part of what we're doing because it'll indicate we can't sit there and work on one item and just burn a lot of time. So
Right.
the budget has to be complete by November 17th, which is our next board meeting.
Right.
Only 13 days from today, so not a lot of time. In that board meeting, we can make minor corrections, minor stuff, because shortly after that meeting, we need to advertise the budget publicly, and at that point, we really can't make any changes. The budget will eventually be adopted in the December board meeting, which is December 15th. So that's the timeline, and I wanted to say that at the beginning so we knew how much time we had to manage this task.
So John or
Thanks,
Mary
John.
or David, I don't know how you want to handle this, but I did have some comments that I had put together in preparation for the last board meeting. And I don't know if that will help us get started, or if someone else has another way to get us started.
Donna, I've got something that might be helpful.
Okay.
I thought we might spend a little time with the format of the budget.
Okay.
You and I have worked with it for quite a few years, but not everybody else has. So if everybody's got a budget in front of you, you skip the front page, because the front page are all totals that will come from the back. So we really don't look at that much today. All that information we brought forth
I
from
do,
the back.
before we move, I do want to make a comment, though. I'm not used to seeing negative balances.
There's some errors.
Okay, so,
There's some errors, and I'll point them out.
okay, so I'm hoping that by the time we get done our work today, or prior to the November 17th meeting, we can do what we need to do to get those balances not to be negative.
Yeah, there's some errors, and they're back in the worksheets. So if we look at if you look at the budget, second budget page, which is the beginning of the general fund. So you'll see a whole series of columns, and it's actually laid out pretty well. So of course, the first column is the description of the expenses and the account numbers. Certainly that's important. But as a point of reference, we have 2020 final budget figures in the first column. The blue column says 2020.
Right.
Then the next group of columns are grouped together, and that's 9 months. That's this year's spending, 9 months to September 30th.
Real numbers.
They're real numbers, but they're only up to September 30th.
Yeah, and just to be clear, because John, you're right, it's a little confusing through there. The negative means underspend. Now, farther along, I think the negative gets mixed up, but when you see a negative 52,000, it means it's underspent in that fund.
You're correct, but there are some errors in here.
Yeah, I saw that.
Some of these red numbers, and I'll point the ones out that I know of, but my guess, some extraneous number was put in somewhere, or a formula has been stepped over or something, so.
But can I just say, Melissa, it looks pretty darn good.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Oh, yeah, this is not a
I
negative.
don't mean it to be critical in any way at all.
No, you're not.
But the next group of columns is 2021, and that's a projected cost. So what we're taking is the 9 months we spent so far, and we're projecting how that might end up in this third group. And that's an important set of numbers because we use those to make some decisions about what we're going to do in the last column, which is 2022. So that's kind of the way the budget's formatted. The 9 months period, probably not too relevant to us, what we've done before. We just use that as a guide to come up with the projected year, which is the important set of numbers. So just want to make sure everybody understood that format. And this workbook here has got, it's an Excel workbook, and some of the columns are just straight arithmetics, and others have formulas built into them, and some of them have formulas that carry numbers from sheet to sheet up to the front. So I think that's okay on the format. Just an overall discussion. We probably need to talk about, and I want to get involved in some easy stuff first, so we don't get bogged down on something that really frustrates it. But on the budget, the first thing you need to do is validate the income that we have, all of our income sources. And we're not going to be able to do this in a meeting, but I want to establish that work needs to be validated. We get one of our primary income sources is the real estate tax. And the real estate tax is based on the total assessed value of all the property in the township. So one way to determine whether that's going to change from year to year is if we could look at some county records to see what the total assessed value for Franklin is in 2021 and what it shows up in 2022. if those numbers are the same, then the income numbers we have for this year can carry right over to next year.
Right, and I think that's what you did.
So that's a quick way, rather than bog down into the numbers. And the real estate tax we get, there's three sources. One is the main real estate tax, which comes in, most of it comes in April or after April, when everybody pays the 2% discount rate. So we get a lot of that income in May. And then the rest of it comes in sometime in the fall when the actual tax bill is due without the discount rate. Then there's a column for real estate tax delinquency. And that's just that's some taxes that the county has collected for us that were delinquent for some reason. We really can't predict that. We just put a number in there, an estimate. And then there's a column, and I can't really explain it right now because I don't remember the details. Real estate tax from the prior year. You'll see a line item in there, and I don't know what that is, but
Late, people find very late.
it could be late, or maybe there's a distinction between just being late and delinquent. But they're smaller numbers, but I just want to point that out. Then another major source of income is the real estate transfer tax. Every time somebody transfers a piece of real estate, we get a percentage of the sale price. And what I would expect we do is just take whatever we used last year, carry that over this year. There's no indication of what it could be. Historically, we've done that and haven't gotten into real difficulty with it. The next major income is the earned income tax, and that comes in pretty regularly. We get a check about every 2 weeks or so, Melissa, something like that. So as Keystone collects that money, we get it. So that's a fairly regular income and helps us with the cash flow. And then we get down into the cable TV franchise and some other smaller income sources.
And that comes sporadically, I think, with cable TV, right? Or does that come on a regular basis? Or
Pardon?
Does the cable TV come on a regular basis, or just kind of shows up sometimes?
I don't know what the regularity of payment is, but I believe we'll just carry over
If the numbers are good, I don't know if you know if the numbers are right.
unless we find, and we don't have a lot of time to do this, unless we find something that changes
Just keep it.
our mind, we'll carry over something that's close to what we did this year. That's what we'll probably do with many of these.
Right.
Interest, recycling grants. There's one item in here that's a fairly high number. The conservation district is 100. You see, we got 135,000.
That was a one shot.
That was a one-time item for the Esmo Bridge, so that won't carry over.
Right. I don't think.
The other item that's got a fairly big number is the building and miscellaneous fees permits. That's based on how many building permits we have. We just take the number we used previously and carry it over. So I think that gives you some idea of the income. We'll probably spend some time next week in the office here trying to make sure we've got these numbers correct.
So John, I want to comment on one number, and I know
Go
most
ahead,
people probably would not care about it, but it makes me crazy. So the interest, I know you're not going to get $1,200 interest, and I would not project, and I wouldn't project it into next year, only because you can see we're like $32 in 2021. I know it's not going to blow the budget, but I hate projecting a number that you know is not
All right.
real. So
Well,
I mean, make it $50 or something, or
We'll circle that with a question mark, but that's a questionable number.
and that numbers, and that interest number and income is gonna be consistent throughout all the funds you go to.
Yeah, you'll see interest in other pages, so.
Right, and what I would suggest you do is just look at the 9 months, September, that this 9 months bucket here that says this is what we've done so far in 2021. And based on what you see there, you can get a sense of how, what's it gonna look like? Is it gonna be $50 or is it gonna be $200? It's not enough. So that's just something it's a minor thing, but like I said, I hate projecting something I know is wrong.
Okay.
Go ahead, John.
I'm gonna point out one error I see.
Okay,
If you look at the top of that column, the proposed budget, the cash carryover from the previous year,
Right,
it's a minus 10,000.
yeah, I was gonna say, where's that?
That comes from the bottom of the last page
From
here,
the general
as-
fund.
from the general fund, and there's something wrong with that column.
Because we should never be $10,000.
No, that number should be somewhere between 100 and 140,000 historically. So there's some error in one of these numbers here, so we'll have to find that out.
Okay, all right,
Okay, the
let's
cash
do that.
carryovers, I got a big question mark around that.
So that number needs to be brought up.
It's, I wonder if it's this conservation district number.
I started to look at it a little while ago, but I didn't have an electronic copy at home, so I'm not gonna,
You couldn't figure out.
That's still
what's wrong.
271 for projected.
there's a problem in that whole column there that's created that low cash carryover.
Yeah, being over $100,000 could make a big difference in everything.
Oh, yeah, it's some obvious errors, so
Yeah, okay.
we'll find it.
Okay, good.
But, you know, based on the incomes, there's nothing that radically changes year to year, I mean, other than this conservation district fund, this sort of volatile cash that we got.
All right,
I think that's gonna be our general approach, is to carry over expenses from last year to this year, unless we have some specific reason that it's either gonna be above or below. And certainly, we're gonna talk about EMS, we know that's gonna grow,
Right.
so at some point, talk about that. One thing we could do, to talk about some real issues, so you go back to the last page
what, of the book?
of the book, yeah, and that's called the American Rescue Fund.
Right.
And that's a new worksheet you put into the workbook, primarily to manage
Right, okay,
the spending of the funds we got from the American Rescue Fund. Because you recall, we received this year $237,440 some dollars, and we're gonna get another payment of the same amount for 2022. So, and we have spent some of that money. So I thought it was important to establish a workbook, a discrete workbook, because we need to validate how we spent that money. Because if we spend it incorrectly, then somebody will come back and want it back.
right,
So that's why I created this sheet, and Melissa got it in here, and I tied it into the book, so all the links are tied in. We did document what we spent this year. Melissa found a page, which you all have a copy of. I'm sorry, you can't show it to the others.
that's a good job.
If you look at this one sheet right here, you'll see that for the park, we had Hampshire Bridge, tennis courts, seal coating, and then pickleboard for $39,927. And you'll see that number as an expense in here. Then we also spent a good bit of money on stormwater, $130,125, you'll see that in the budget. And then we also spent $21,200 for office equipment. That's all the audio equipment that we're gonna have to manage these in-person meetings. So we've got that documented as an expense in this year's budget. But there's one item on the sheet that we are unable to determine what it is. And you go to the top of the sheet, there's a $20,902 number. And the title is called liquid fuel replacement.
So,
We have not been able to understand what that is.
so the way I.
Oh, I know what it is, no, you do know, I know what it is.
Yeah, so it's the money that we lost from liquid fuels due to COVID
Right,
shutdown.
Okay.
So we were allowed to add back money to
Oh,
that.
okay.
fund.
so it's legitimate.
Yeah,
Okay, so then that's a legitimate expense.
Yeah.
That needs to go into this budget here.
Mhm.
And what we don't have for it is an account category, which we'll have to find.
Okay.
So that'll go in as an expense here. Plus. Okay, all right, great. Okay, because Melissa, I've been fussing with that for a while, neither of us had any idea what it was. All right, so it's a legitimate expense.
Right.
It goes in
Yeah,
here.
replacement. So, just so, most of you may know this answer, I remember when I talked to Joan about the way these budgets work, that even though we haven't done anything yet in 2022, we have to allocate money to be spent in 2022, or we're not able to spend it. Do you mean, like, I know right now there's zeros in the expense part, because of course we're not in 2022 yet, but something about, she said you have to project what you think you might spend, like, and you have to put it there, because if you don't put something there,
Yeah.
then you can't spend. Does any of that make any sense to you?
You're absolutely right, we gotta budget that money because,
Okay.
And it's
right
really
now,
the
you-
only approved things that they say you can spend that money for.
if you look at the top of the cash carryover for this particular American Rescue Funds, right now we showed it about 47,000.
Right,
When we take that other expense out, it's gonna be about 25,000.
right,
So then we can see we're also gonna get another federal entitlement of 237.42. So you can see we're gonna have a cash balance in here, $284,000. But if you go down, there are no expenses.
right, we have the
So
close.
Donna, you're right on the money there. We need to figure out how we're gonna spend that money.
And so it could be, I mean, it doesn't have to be
I
like.
don't know what the
your-
rules are about carryover any further.
Right, but it could be
Yeah.
capital projects is like a bolus, and stormwater improvement could be a bolus. Like, it's not like you have to bring it down to the 9th degree, but you have to just have large categories of where you can.
So we use that, oh, go ahead, Nancy.
Oh, sorry, it looks like with capital projects, we're looking at improving the township building. So I see the spending in a different page. So maybe we can put it there. I think that, we have to be really careful that where we spend it, we're allowed to spend it. But I think township improvements is a relatively safe area to put it. And then parks, but we did a lot on the parks already. And, maybe stormwater. I'm not quite sure how that works out, but.
Stormwater, I know is allowed.
Okay, great.
There is a book of rules on this thing somewhere, so.
So I guess my question about whether or not we need to line item the American Rescue Fund budget is when we determined that we were gonna get this money, we didn't have an American Rescue Fund budget. We just had an account with the money in it and spent it as we use. I don't know if we treat it like a general fund rather than.
I think you have to have buckets though.
Well, I think
We should have the buckets, but I don't know if we need them. I mean, I think we should have the buckets to understand as a board, like how much money do we actually want to spend on parks this year versus infrastructure improvements versus, right? We don't want to be in a situation where we're just like, issue of the weekend or something.
do you think we should keep it separate like this? Because I think we should.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, no, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Otherwise,
We're gonna get audited on this.
You gotta get audited on it.
Yeah, there's no.
So we're gonna have stormwater spending here.
Yeah.
Stormwater spending from our regular general fund. And then park stuff for the parks and whatever we.
I guess we have to be careful not to double,
Right,
right,
right.
because I think a lot of these the park improvement stuff, does that show up in the budget under park improvement as well as what we spent?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, you're gonna have it in two places, so we need to be careful.
Yeah.
You're right,
So we
we're
need
gonna
to
have
look at that.
stormwater spending here. Now, what's important here is that you only have this money next year. I don't know what's gonna happen the following year. So we can't get ourselves in a situation where we establish a budget where we're dependent on this money.
Right.
Right, that's not the intent.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
so-
make sure
Yes.
Can I ask a question?
Go
When
ahead.
is the cutoff date for us actually spending this money? Is it the end of next year or do we have more time to
I
spend
want to
money?
say 2024. I think it has to be spent by 2024, but
Okay,
don't quote.
Spend, so we need, there's a point right there. We need to
Yeah,
find out what the spend out deadline is.
And as I said, I think buckets could be broad, it could be capital improvement projects. And
Right.
like you said, the office, would a capital improvement project even be the park? I don't know, like, if we want to do.
not the actual building that you're sitting in would be different than what we spend in the park. And as some of us have talked about, maybe putting, I don't know, a new piece of playground equipment. You're in the $100,000 range right there. So I mean, we could budget that. I mean, we may end up not doing it, but that there would be 100 right there. And the building, I don't even want to guess what that would cost.
If it gets started, we could it's not gonna be cheap, but we should get
No,
started.
it's not.
Okay, yeah, I
Okay,
think we
so-
can easily take it up the capital project.
Alright.
And then would you put the rest of the money into stormwater? And if during the year, the need changes, as long as we verify that it's okay to spend the money where we want to, we're good to go?
So I would hope so.
Okay.
All right, so I think the key points going forward here is we need to identify when the spend out deadline is. Sure we know, we don't go over that. And then we need a budget.
Yeah.
We need a budget for what we're gonna spend.
Big picture.
And the spend out deadline will determine that. If you have to spend it all next year, that's a fair amount of money to spend.
Yeah.
Hopefully we spread it out over another year.
Stormwater relief.
Well, we don't know, we do have, we'll get to stormwater, but we do have some specific guidance from Pete on stormwater, so I don't think any of us have any other information that would change his recommendation. We'll get to that at some point. Okay, so I think we're okay with this thing right now. We got a path forward on that.
Yeah.
So that's, I wanted to pick one item that's pretty easy to deal with. That's why I did it, but I don't have any other specific area I want to go to. So it's up to the board. If you have notes or comments or things you want to look at, we can take a look at it.
Well, we could start with the emergency fund. I mean, we all know we have to.
All right,
find out
let's
about
go there and talk about that. Both David and I have attended some meetings lately about that. We've distributed some information to the board that something's coming. But it's the way I would summarize it is the fire companies, Avondale and West Grove and Medic 94 have given us their budget for next year. We have those numbers and most of them are already ground into the budget.
Right.
But we also know that some costs are going to increase next year as a result of the closing of Jannersville Hospital. They haven't given us any guidance, money-wise, as to what that could be. We've had meetings and they've outlined, that Westgrove went through it the other night. They went through their whole procedure, what systems are going to impact it, and to what extent they would need to have additional personnel. But to put a real number on it, they don't have it. I asked them whether they could provide just a high spot estimate, percent increase over where we are right now. They didn't have that number.
When we talked to West Grove, they didn't seem like they used Jennersville all that much anyway. So it sounded like a lot of their emergencies went to Chester.
Well, a fair number of them do to go to Chester County Hospital and Christiana Care, but those turnaround times are like almost 2 hours versus 45 or 40 minutes to Jennersville.
Right.
So,
And John, isn't West Grove planning a November 11th meeting? And I'm hoping they give us tighter numbers, like at least a
I would
percentage.
expect so.
And that would be before our board meeting, so, and they're the ones we use the most, right? When I looked at it, it looked like we used Avondale maybe 10% of the time, but West Grove 90% of the time. So that's the number West Grove that we really want to know.
That's right. So if we don't get any guidance from them at the point that we have to finish this budget, I would propose that we might consider a 10 or 15% escalation just as a buffer.
For both West Grove and
Over the numbers they gave us for this year.
So John, just to be clear, so we're looking at 121,000, so I hope everybody's on the same page, when the emergency service fund
No.
budget. Right, that's the budget page.
No, it does not affect fire protection. It's only on EMS,
Okay, great.
which is the emergency end. So the ones that the accounts that would be affected would be Medic 94, Avondale EMS, and West Grove EMS. Fire is unaffected.
Perfect, John, so that's the last three, which are a little less expensive, but still.
That's great, but-
Okay.
So the numbers that we can we could change the Avondale fire now. Because for fire, or for EMS, what do we pay for EMS? We pay $3,500
We've already done it. Okay.
for 2021 projected year end.
Yeah.
The proposed is 15,320. Oh, you already got it.
You already did that.
You already did it, okay.
She's rounding in there, because because when I came out of that meeting, I brought back some data, I gave it to Melissa, she's got it.
And that's a huge increase. Now, there's some reasons for that, but
There's a lot of reasons for that. They've had some serious financial management issues. And, in reality, and I'll be pretty frank about it, they have never been able to come up with what I considered an auditable, credible budget for us, as West Grove has. So I always held their number low, but now they realize that they need to get their act together. So that's part of the reason for the big step up is that they, we probably should have been paying them more over the years, but I just held them back because they couldn't justify the expenses.
So Melissa's already done that, so the Medic 94 services, that actually went down for us, but that was because of the new formula, am I correct? Because we had budgeted 30,000 in 2021, and we're budgeting 21,840.
Yeah, I'm surprised at that. Why that number is lower, that's
I
good.
thought it was the formula that helped us out.
Well, the formula is part of it. You know what, you're right. That's probably it because the Medic 94 did not adopt the formula until fairly late.
But John, are you still suggesting that we hike that up 10 to 15%?
I think all three of them, you gotta put at least 10% in. As a whole.
John, I agree, 10% at least, with the hospital closing and rumors of them maybe buying another ambulance. And yeah, I think 10% is certainly reasonable.
It could be significant. I remember talking to Justin Gatorno there
Yeah.
several weeks ago. And he said, well, our ambulance replacement schedule is about 7 years on a piece of equipment. He thinks it might be down under 4 years now.
So we're saying, for all these three numbers, I'm this is clarity, I'm not pushing back. For all these three numbers, even though we significantly increase the Avondale EMS, we want to take the numbers that Melissa currently has in the budget, increase them by at least 10%.
Yes.
Okay, is that?
Yes, because Avondale's in the same position as West Grove. They have not figured out what the economic impact
Is it on there?
of the hospital closing is yet. So we know that's in there. We at least accommodate it in some way.
Does that blow the budget then? Do we have to get money from somewhere else, then, John?
You know what? Like I said at the beginning, the budget has to balance.
Yeah, so we may have to, right?
What you have to do is put in the numbers that you know and need,
Right.
and then when you add all your expenses and income, you see where you are, whether you're up or down, so.
And where do you take it from, the general fund, is that your source?
Well, that's always the interesting part, when you're overspent, where do you take it from, so.
If I could just mention, it's a little early. We haven't made some decisions on staffing and the overhead around administrative functions, but it looks like even with the consideration of everything we may do, it looks like we may be under about $80,000 to $100,000 there next year. Now that assumes we're not hiring another manager. If we hire another manager, then that changes it.
Yeah, I would like to have Melissa run those numbers for us, because I don't know, you could be right, Nancy, I just. don't
Yeah,
know.
no problem. I did the math and, it's better to have it double checked, but that's what it looked like to me.
Okay.
Because like you said, we have some unknowns, we have the salary of Jeff and Melissa figured out, we have your salary figured out. We have a sense of, I don't know how much you know about what benefits cost, but I don't, if they've already given you premium increases for 20.
Yeah, I added the treasurer, I added all those roles. I
Okay.
added the benefits, and that's what I came out with, but
Nancy,
yeah.
maybe you could share it with Melissa, so she, instead of having to recreate, she could just.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay.
Sure thing.
Basically, I think that's the one item that I had here is that we need to make adjustments for staffing costs. And we should include the treasurer, we're gonna get ready to engage in that also, so.
Right.
That's not something we can do in detail here, but that's certainly a workshop type thing, so. Melissa, that's a big item, update the budget for staffing costs plus the treasurer.
And if you have some left over, that just gives you some, we don't have to spend it, it just gives us some comfort that there is.
When we're all done, we'll see how much we got left over.
And Nancy, could I ask you these numbers that you totaled up? When
Yeah.
you send it to Melissa, could you send it to me? Because I did a total and I didn't come out with the same numbers as you. So I don't know if we're comparing the same thing. So if you send it to me, I'd like to look at it also.
Okay, I sent it to you once, and Melissa, I have a photograph of my math. Can I just use your cell phone or something to send it to?
You got it.
And what I would ask is that, Nancy sends it to Mayor, if you want to see that, I think that's fine, but I think the key then is Melissa to look at it, and then Melissa will come up with numbers and she shares them with us.
Right. Melissa has to own it, not me, because well, we own it, but Melissa has to be comfortable with it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Good, all right.
All
What else do we
right,
do?
okay, emergency service, we took care of that.
Okay, so I have another question,
Go ahead.
open space. So, once again, I could be wrong, I just remember Joe telling me that our open space budget is different from like a normal mortgage would be. And I believe she said that the cost of it increases over time, so it's not like for me, my mortgage is a certain amount of money, I pay that every month.
Yeah.
But she said it actually gets bigger.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's been
Yeah, well, we have a
put
loan,
in here,
we have a loan payment schedule for every year, and I gave that to Melissa.
okay.
So, one thing about the open space loan is that there are some variations, yes, as you suggest. But the principal payment, we pay that once a year, is due sometime in January. So if you look at the
We
open
need to have
space
a
loan,
goal.
Okay.
we see a value in there somewhere a little over 100,000 in there to cover that principal payment.
So Melissa, have you taken into consideration for the 2022 budget, the fact, whatever the new numbers are they already in here?
I believe so.
Okay, so that's
I'll
good.
go
So
back
that's
and
already
double
been-
check it.
Because
Yeah.
we looked at that a
I
couple of
think
weeks
John
ago.
and I looked at
Yeah, we
that.
looked at that a couple of weeks ago, but we want to check it, just make sure that we get that.
I'll put that in.
Because it is bigger than it was in 20, so it looks like it's progressive, so that's a good, I mean, you've calculated, I didn't know how big it got, I had no sense of how much more, it seems like it's just a couple $1,000s more, I'm guessing. Okay, that's good.
Okay, so one thing that could affect this is if the real estate taxes change. You don't know whether that'll happen or not, that'll affect the income in here because the real estate tax is divided into a number of categories. It's general fund, there's open space, there's fire and EMS. And what's the third category here, Jeff? Anyway, it's divided up. You'll see income coming in each one of these categories here.
Right, if it affects, it's gonna affect everything, so if our real estate taxes, it's gonna affect everything. So
The one thing we have here, looking at this one open space loan for the Stolfus one, which is about 44,000 a year.
Right, fourth or fifth pay.
There's, I think the payoff is 2023.
It is,
Right,
yeah.
And so going into 2024, that would be available either back to the general fund or in here.
Right, or for another easement that's coming our way.
So if we're on, just out of ignorance, we're on a schedule on this loan, is there any benefit to re-looking at how this loan is structured? Or did we get it, the way it's set up is the best way it's set up?
I don't think.
Good question, because I've asked that, and I never got a real good answer with the structure.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, I got an answer, but I think, it's worth, I remember asking Joan, she said, oh, no, it's a great rate, blah, blah, blah. But we have a new treasurer, we have a new bookkeeper, I don't see it to do tomorrow, but what's to hurt to look and see?
No, yeah, so I think it's a good idea.
And you have the treasurer guy that you can work with?
It does have a odd structure.
I do think, sorry.
The interest rate isn't bad, it's like 2.78 or 73 or something like that, so it's not.
I think Stefan tried to run the numbers because he had
Yeah,
this
that's right.
question and it didn't come out any better. But hey, we've got, if we approve a treasurer, that person is very educated and they can.
Doesn't hurt to keep asking the question.
But that loan payment runs out to 2040, so we're not gonna see the end of that thing very soon.
Well, that's even more reason to see if you can
That's
do a
true.
better job, right? Because it's not like it's over tomorrow. No, that's good, so that's good. All right,
For
what else?
any of the smaller other funds, we probably need to,
Well, I also look at the MS4 to make sure that we have enough money. I know we have stormwater that we put some aside for the rescue fund, right? But is there anything else that we need to put? Is it MS, I don't remember, John, is it in the general fund?
Pete Eisenbrown has given us some information, she's bringing, Melissa's bringing it right now.
Yeah, I think it's like 20K you want, but has that been done?
A couple of areas we can add to that. It looks like we have a pretty good underspend so far on snow and removal. So that gives us obviously that doesn't add us year on year, but it's a good 1 year reduction. So that might be good to look at. That's quite significant. And then I'm a little confused on the capital projects. So wanted to come back to that at some point. Those are my two.
What page are you talking about?
Yeah, do you want to take us to a specific page, Nancy, so we can?
Let me find it again.
Okay, take your time.
That's really where I want to go, it's just,
What do you want to
Okay.
I've covered the items that I've identified, so.
Yeah. Page 4. If you look, it
What
looks
what
like
category? Is it general fund?
General fund page 4.
it's general fund.
Okay, give me your number, then give me those funky numbers.
Pages on the top, numbers on the top.
Yeah. Page 4, it says snow ice removal, total costs. We budget 260. It looks like so far we've spent about 48.
And I think, not that we have to do it again, but I think that was Joan's, how she funded the road program, is that the excess, now, not all of it is excess, because remember, you have some amount has to go into January to keep us going.
Right.
But the snow removal was really our contribution to, the general fund's contribution to the road program, or whatever other capital improvement you want to do.
I don't think so.
What we've historically done over the years is we allocate 260,000
Right.
as a nominal amount, with 60,000 being the material and salt. And if we have a light winter and we underspend it, then we typically were using that money. We roll that additional money into the road maintenance program.
Into the capital project,
Yeah,
sure.
there's one aspect about it we have to be careful with,
Okay.
is you always need to maintain, I don't know how much it was, like 10 or 20,000 in the December cash flow, because in case you got a late December storm.
Right. That's right.
So that's in there somewhere. I can't lay my hands on it, but it's a basic principle we need to maintain. We can't end up with spending, and we're not there this year, obviously. But we do have to be careful of that, not to overspend it in December.
Right.
And find we don't have money for December snowstorm.
Yeah, so I would recommend not screwing around with the snow removal, but knowing that it is money that's gonna be, hopefully, that if January is not crazy, available for something in
Well,
2022.
Usually by the end of March, you'll know
If not before, yeah.
how much you have.
Right. And the other thing in there is we've really come down to not needing much on guide rails. So that's another 20-some thousand that we can probably reallocate.
Is
Well,
that,
the one thing I'd
2,000
say-
this year.
I'd say about guide rails is there is a list somewhere of
Yeah.
guide rail projects. We
We didn't do
typically did a little bit every year, but I know there are other areas where we looked at putting in guardrails and we only put in so much a year, so.
Just for 2021, we did not do much for whatever reason. So just
do
FYI.
you think it was because the road program was later? I mean, I don't remember, I know.
I think we've gotten the worst of them maybe. And I think,
Wait,
Go ahead,
so-
There is
Let Jeff talk. Jeff, do you know? what
When
the-
we had done Churchill Road there.
Yeah.
In 2 locations.
Yeah, we did some
One
work.
nearby Paul Overton's and then one up around the corner, going to Queen Lane there by Mr. Laurie's.
Yeah. There are some spots where we still would like to put some more guardrail in.
Yeah.
It's only
I know we
$2,000,
did-
it wasn't so more than
We did
$2,000.
Guernsey Road back in 2017, we stopped short on the guardrail, just we only had so much
Oh,
money
okay,
that
the
year.
little
But there is a section going past where the guardrail stops right now, where you might want to consider some more guardrails, so.
I agree, and then one of the other spots was up the upper portion of Churchill John where that cement truck went over. That was a discussion.
Would it be reasonable then to just say, here's the proposed projects that we have for 2022, and just budget it with a little bit of slush?
that's a good idea, Dave.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good idea. All right. So you'll put something together for that.
Yep.
Project it, and then you share it with Melissa.
Oh, you've never come up with a budget to fix all the guardrail requirements.
No, it's just, here's three we know we're gonna happen, that's like to do, and we get one extra one in case the car drives through.
Okay. All right, that makes it more, makes it real. What else, Nancy? Did you have another one to look at?
Nancy, do you have anything else on this one?
She's muted, she's
I
muted.
don't know if we can hear you,
She's muted.
but you're muted.
It looks like someone else is trying to get in.
She's talking, but can't.
Nancy, you're still muted. We can't hear you.
I know, my whole,
There you go. We got
my
you.
whole thing died. Yeah,
Oh,
so,
words of wisdom. Go ahead.
All right, we got it.
okay, so if we go to, the Capitol,
Backwards, okay.
here, let me try to find it. Capital Fund, that's, it doesn't have a page number on it, but
Yeah, there's only one page there.
Yeah. so we've got the truck purchase, we have something, plans to convert old salt shed, plans to convert storage of office space. I can't quite figure out how we get up to 145. And I'm wondering which of that we can put in the American Rescue Fund.
It's a good question. So the office improvements, if they are, and I'm gonna paraphrase, if the office improvements are designed to allow for virtual space, and safe, safe presentations due to COVID, we can cover it. So
Okay, that's within the rules.
that's within the rules. So anything we do in this office or in this room, we can spend money using those funds. So removing all of this extra furniture, getting AV system in, social distance, so that's okay. The only question I have is whether or not you can actually use it for office improvements.
So what's going on in the back room?
Yeah,
right?
I think you can, because it still has to do with safe working environment. and using
Right.
it for
Well, Dave, I would think, for example, moving all those file cabinets out of the meeting room you're sitting in, that would require us fixing the other end of the building, but the purpose is more open space for meetings and safety, so,
It all should be covered if that's what
Right.
if we choose to do all that work, that all will be covered under the American Rescue.
So Nancy, the way I would want us to consider it, and I'll just put this out there, this is a big project. So instead of taking any money out of the capital fund, let's just try to do more towards that project. I mean, it's languished, and it's not anybody's fault. We're all trying to do the best we can.
Yeah,
But if we can make some kind of headway back there.
I'm happy with that. I just can't figure out the math. The 2022 proposed budget says 145,000. And
Sorry, where's that?
I'm just not getting how that adds up.
Maybe I don't know where you're.
So 2022, the yellow, the very last column, that's, or the second to last, it's yellow.
So how it got negative, you mean? How it got, because see, there's projected money being spent. So you
Is
have.
that negative? I thought- Shoot, I've written all over it. I don't know now.
Yeah, there's no transfer from the general fund in here. See it? It's zero.
Yeah, see, remember all the snow,
Yeah.
numbers that we're talking about, it hasn't been transferred here yet, so there's very little in here, there's whatever came over, left over from 2021 is that 31,000. There's a little bit of interest, which isn't gonna be that high anyways, and so you have that, and then, remember we said you have to put something in expenses, because you wanna spend it, even though we don't really have a project, 459,000, and that's how you get negative, so.
But
we
why,
have to- Okay.
why do we have 159,000 budgeted for capital projects and total 179,000? We should probably have
Because-
negatives there.
Yeah, see, there's 20,000 in front of it, so you have 10,000 plans to convert old salt shed, which isn't even applicable, that shouldn't be.
Right, I just think maybe we forgot to put negative on the 159,000.
No. What's Nancy, what's missing, there's no transfer from the general fund into this account.
There's no income.
Zero.
Gotcha.
So that's what's missing. So we have to fit figure out.
We have to bring some in. But remember we talked about it before, you gotta say what you're gonna spend, even if you don't spend it, so you can spend it.
So you can
Right.
spend, it, right, if you don't
Okay.
budget, you can spend it. So.
But none of this has been allocated, it's just
Right, okay.
cost, capital projects.
So this fund gets funded by leftover snow?
Yes.
Well, typically the leftover snow account usually rolls into the road maintenance.
Okay.
But you can roll it wherever you want. Once you know you don't have to spend it for snow every year, you retain enough for the December snowstorm, then that's excess money. We have had some winters where we overdid it, believe me. So.
And John, the roads are always the needy fund. I mean, the more money we can spend on roads, the better we can make our roads. I would think that's why we always do that way. I mean, the building can wait, not forever, but the building can wait.
Right,
So
right.
we fill the capital fund once we know what we're gonna spend on capital.
That's right. That's
So-
right.
So
we gotta-
that stays zero until we figure it
So we figure out what that 159 is gonna be or whatever it is, then we just bring in the amount we need to provide just a small cash balance. in the end, so.
So Mary, I'm happy to hear what you said about roads, but I would like us, and thank, we have the rescue fund that we can start looking about. And I know Joe tried to do this, but it got difficult because everybody was so busy, you couldn't get a contractor in to look at it, I think was the problem. But,
And I agree with you, Donna. We do have to get back into fixing up the building. I think the problem's been, can't get a contractor to bid it. So I don't know, Jeff, can you comment on that? Have you had any luck finding a contractor to come in?
No, I've had 2 contractors come in, they seemed interested, promised that they would give a estimate, and then I never hear from them again.
Jeff, do we have a scope of work for that thing, some specific scope of work we're giving them?
Yes, and
Okay.
I'll give a
Yeah,
copy
I
to the
didn't know we
board.
had defined it to that detail. other than
I'm happy to give you a copy of that.
Okay, very good.
okay.
Along those lines, I know it's not emergency relief funds, but I'm wondering if we can organize or somehow straighten up the equipment section. Maybe, I don't know, put stuff under a shed or it's that kind of that first thing we see across from the recycling bins.
Oh,
Good idea.
yeah, maybe some fencing or something. Are you thinking, Nancy? to just-
Fencing would be great, just
Cover.
something, and, making sure that it's not the first thing people see.
There was a plan to screen some of that with some, if you notice, there's a whole lot of plantings around the township. We screened some of our areas, so when you look up the lane, you didn't see the township stuff, and all that stuff has worked well. We were putting about 2,500, 3,000 a year into shrubbery. Stefan was managing that.
Right.
But the longer term goal was, once that area was established and they knew how much space they needed to get in and out, is to close some of it up with some plantings. So you saw less of it.
Are we there yet, John? Or are we?
I mean, it really just kind of died because at this point, we know the function of that place. Because when we first started, we weren't sure, the opening was wide enough, how they go in and out. I think we know that now. You could define that thing now and put some shrubbery in there,
Yeah.
close up the opening, and you'd see less of it. I don't think you get rid of it all, but I think you could see less of it.
That's a really good idea, Nancy. So this would be part of the capital project, and some of the work that we could do on the building itself, we can get that hopefully out of the rescue fund. But to work on this, on the, whatever you want to screen, it's an outside project, I don't know what you want to call it, Jeff, but that would be something else that we should, maybe we can put some money towards that.
Has the planning commission already given us a plan on how to screen it? I thought I read that way back, maybe when the salt shed was being built, they also included screening that area. Anybody else recall that?
No.
I don't recall that, but I think it may be worth having a look at it. I mean, I don't know if you have to go to the planning commission, or that's what you think is the best place to talk, but I think it would be worth to have somebody look at it now that Jim has kind of, like you said, he has established his area. It's with the bins and all, so it might be worthwhile for a relook. I don't know who does that.
John, wasn't there a plan floating around?
Yeah, there is something floating around. I'm
Yeah.
not gonna lay my hands on it, but
That's what I'm referring to. Whatever, I read that somewhere.
I know that we're gonna put more screening along that road.
Yep.
To screen the equipment, but
I wonder
the point
if
that
Stefan knows, we could contact Stefan, maybe Stefan knows.
I could do that, or I think I can lay my hands
Okay.
on one next week, that
Yeah.
plan.
Okay, good, all right.
But that's been very successful, that screening, all that
Oh, it looks a
stuff
lot
that we got
better.
planted in there grew perfectly, I don't think we lost any of it.
Oh,
Used
we
to
lost
do
one
that
or two
every
trees,
fall.
yeah, but they replaced them, so that was good, they're really good about it. So, this was good capital fund. Nancy, you have any more ideas? Because you're batting 100 here, you did good.
Nope, no more.
How about,
Let's see.
where's MS4 at? Can you just someone show me where we put the money in for MS4? Is that general funds, is that?
Yeah. I think it's just general fund stormwater.
And it just had that up.
Well, storm water management engineering,
They're in the wrong place at the top.
and then there's another tab.
So the 150,000,
Yeah, and Pete said if we can keep that and split it, 75K for MS4
okay.
and then 75 for construction.
Is that get back to what Jim does with the water, the outlets, Jeff, is that what the other part is?
That can be part of it, yes.
Okay, all right, good, so there's a, thank you, you got it.
Yeah, and then the 20K for the Act 167, if we can budget that.
So that's another 20, so I said 75 for MS4, 75 for outlets, and is there another 20K, because I don't see, where's that, is that?
That's Act 167.
Yeah, but is it here, is it, budgeted, or do we have to get it?
I think we have to get it, put it in the budget.
So we gotta find 20K somewhere.
Yeah,
We'll put it in there, and we'll see how much money I have left.
or we can take it, like Pete said.
Oh,
like,
for rescue,
Yeah, yeah,
for the American Rescue Fund, okay.
or if you just want to give them 75 for carryover, and then like 35 for construction, and then 20, like, you can break that 150 up.
Okay. I mean, I look at it, I think if we can, if, it all depends what you're taking from the American Rescue Fund, but if we can use it for something that we really need to do anyways, it would be nice to take it out.
I would suggest we try to, if it's allowed, take it out of the American Rescue Fund.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Spread
right,
it out,
yeah.
before someone decides to take it back for whatever reason.
And then I got this letter from LTL for their fees, they're gonna increase by 3.5% for 2022. So,
Talk about that.
All right, that would affect the engineering costs. some,
Right. Yeah. So that would have to go up 3.5%.
Well, just as that's not the only engineering cost we have, so we
No.
have to break that account down, because we have engineering
Oh, yeah,
costs from Ron Reagan. And we might want to ask him whether his rates are gonna stay the same.
Melissa, we'll need to send out letters to those people,
Lawyers too, right?
the lawyers, the consultants.
Yeah.
And there'll be examples in the file of,
okay.
But for LTL, isn't a lot of their funds are reimbursed anyways? I mean, I think if the work that they do,
Well, for all the permit work,
right,
building permits, they're reimbursed by the people who buy the permits, pay for the permits, although it doesn't cover it 100%, but it's an offset.
okay.
So, but otherwise,
It's on
there are
us.
other engineering costs for stormwater stuff that we're doing.
It's on
There
us.
are costs.
I guess I was getting confused with Stan, and that works, that he does for Lexington Point, and that's a different group, and I know a lot of those costs are reimbursed by, Lexington Point.
There are a couple of things I wanted to talk about on these traffic impact accounts. There's two of these accounts, traffic impact fee east and west.
Okay.
And where the income comes from are what we call fees in lieu, meaning the developer or somebody builds something, they're required as part of our saldos that they have to provide recreational facilities, certain amount of recreational facilities. And instead of doing that, they just pay a fee. So it's a fee in lieu of actually doing the work. So that's where that money comes from. And
So this is, let me just get this, so a developer comes in by, develops something instead of building public tennis courts or something.
right, exactly,
Yes, here's 35.
just gives you
Yeah.
some money. And the township is divided up into in the east and west, so there's some specific boundaries. So that money comes in and we can use that for capital projects and improvements. But we have to do it within
Those,
the right geographical areas. So my point, just explaining as everybody understood, is do we have the numbers in there, the income we expect for next year? Have any way of determining, because I see some numbers in here. So the go-to would be to make sure that, although they're small numbers, that we got.
yeah, so what happened, you know, so what caused the project, let me understand this. The budget was 3,500, and we are at 17,000. So we are $14,000 over budget. That's income, so that's saying that we made more, $14,000 more than what we thought we would.
Well, I think it's how much.
No, we got income, but we didn't spend it, so that's.
You see, you're bringing 10,000 from 2021 from a projected perspective.
Okay.
It's a source of capital money.
Yeah.
So all I'm saying is there's smaller accounts, but we need to work on the accounts to make sure we get the right numbers in there. I don't know.
And what it looks like we didn't spend it.
That's right. But in the past, we have drained these accounts down when we were looking for money. So,
Yeah, a lot of us used for the roads, right? There were much bigger accounts at the time.
Yeah.
Was this because we're not building, John? And I'm not complaining that we're not building, but that's why there's no money, we need to start building money.
well, that's right. We don't have, if you look at our building permit list, we don't have many permits for.
Right, so you're not gonna have a whole lot of money.
We got a lot of permits for improvements, but not for, major capital houses. Things, these have been big accounts in the past, but for the last few years, there hasn't been much money.
So I'm trying to think of, so the only development going in now is less than a point.
Yep.
They've already paid their taxes. Or do they?
You don't have to pay per house, don't they?
It's per house, so I think it's a source of income, as they start building houses.
Each house we get.
You'll get a piece, yes.
So that will be a source, is he
Quite
east
frankly,
or
I'm
west?
not sure I count on a lot of money, guys, but that's it. Just based on past experience.
Well, yeah, you can see
Could
that, you can
change.
see under west, under the impacting west, that there is a notation for 5 houses for 2021, and it never really happened, but I know Jonah put that in there, you see it there?
Yeah.
Yeah, we probably need to spend a little time on these things here.
Okay.
But they don't affect the budget, they're small monies.
Yeah, right.
So it's just a point of
Yeah.
something.
Okay.
Is there anything else that we want
How about the reserve fund, that sticks the way it is, we're not putting any
we
more
should
money in
not
it,
put any more money in the reserve fund,
so we're good here.
because the original target was $250,000. When I first got on the board, we had no reserve, we had nothing. And we were spent out to the limit. So we agreed that every year we would put 45,000 in it. I see we got that in here again.
Yeah, so you're
So
saying,
we're probably gonna take that out.
So
are we, I mean, make sure we're in agreement, okay, we should talk about that.
why settle on $250 million?
It's just a comfort number.
Okay. Well, because I was just thinking like,
Well,
a bad snowstorm could wipe out our snow plow budget, right? So why not? And that could be important.
It could, but, you gotta go back when it got started. We didn't have to ask for a bridge done. That was a huge expense hanging over. There's a couple other projects that were hanging over, so they're not now.
Right.
So, just based on my experience, I wouldn't put any more into it. But that's a board decision, you can decide. what you
And the
wanna
school's
do.
hanging over our head there, John, we don't know what that's gonna take us.
And the value of it is for pure emergency, something that really comes at us. Really happen.
Sure.
But the other advantage is if we get into a cash flow issue, we can dip into that and cover our cash flow.
Yeah,
So-
my view is that with so many changes this year, I think it's a good place. We just let's let our new budget, whether it's emergency services or staffing or whatever, let's just let it play out
Yeah.
and not add any more to it.
And that extra 40, and the increases, Nancy, that we're doing with the EMS and
Right.
whatever, that's easily the 45 that we would have paid over funding. So that's where the money will come from.
Yep,
It's just
probably.
not away.
Okay, so you don't want to put it in here, right?
I don't think so.
All right,
I
that's my
know, I
recommendation.
mean, I don't actually have an opinion.
Yeah.
So.
And I'm like this because I'm a saver, so I want to keep on saving, but I'm
All
like,
right, well,
that's
you know
always
what,
right there.
let's take it out and see how the budget balances.
Right.
If somebody wants to put it back in and we have a balance, then we can do that.
Yeah, I don't feel strongly either way, I just think we wanna, if we're gonna have to cut something, this would be probably.
Yeah.
So let's hear from Mary. Mary, do you have an opinion?
No, I would say leave it the way it is. Don't put another 45 in. We have a lot of other things we're spending our money on. And as you said, John, we have to change it and the numbers don't match, we can do that, but leave it the way it is.
You can imagine the level of discomfort we had back when we started here. Nothing.
Well, it's where you wanted it to go. We're there now, so let's just
We're
see
there
all
now.
these other changes.
And some of the reasons that I originally put it in, those expenses are behind us, we got the Hesper Bridge behind us, that was a big issue.
That's good. Is there any other things?
I don't know, we just quickly thumbed through the pages here. We got a lot of work to do here, a lot of nuts and bolts work.
Yeah, I think we're in pretty good agreement, which is nice. So there's a lot of,
Thank you, Major.
No,
To the road, we did a lot of work this year, kind of running down what our road program strategy is gonna be over the next couple of years. Did we reflect that in this budget about what the road we wanted to work on for 20?
no, we just kind of leave a bunch of money is there.
because it's got
Just something to think about, because we actually have a list, right? That we can work on.
We do.
So,
we do, but generally the list you have is what you knew last year, we see how that has changed, remember that schoolhouse road just came out of the woodwork.
Looks great now.
Yeah.
All the
It
roads.
really does.
So,
But Jeff, you'll have a meeting for
all right,
us.
so
sometime
I
next
think
year.
the path forward here is I'm willing to work with Melissa on the nuts and bolts of this thing during the week to make sure that we get the numbers in the right spot. I'm not gonna make any major changes, if something pops up that's serious, I'll advise the board
Okay.
as soon as possible. But I think we can pull this together in the next 13 days.
We'll do good.
And certainly we can at least provide some preliminary information. I think that's reasonably acceptable. We can work that without making decisions. Just to advise this is what's going on.
So, the only comment, that this last page was here, was I wanted to have this American Rescue Fund separate budget. Do we want to have this, I don't know when I gotta talk about it. We talk about it now, we talk about it in November. How we want to allocate the American Rescue Fund versus, because my guess is it's going to be divided amongst maybe some park improvements, some real estate here, office improvement and stormwater.
Right.
So, is it,
Well, here's what you could do is if you had any time, if somebody had any time, they could sit there and work on a budget. And then present it in that meeting. Put it in our budget or not, so we just, as we talked, it needs to be careful, we spend it on stuff that's approved.
well, yeah, and I think the thing that worries me is if you're going to do office improvements and we're not clear on what we're doing, that could burn through money faster than anything else. So that's where I'm, a little.
But you don't need to say what exactly, you can just say office improvements. You can put,
Well, I gotta put a dollar in.
yeah, so 50,000.
Well, the office improvements certainly include some planning and engineering.
Right.
So certainly get those expenses in there.
What about, I don't know what the requirements are for that money, but we have had a couple of families interested in preserving their land. Is that possible or is that no go?
I would say no, Nancy,
Yes, it has to directly relate to
to COVID.
improving residents' lives as a result.
Right.
So you can't pay down debt, you can't help people preserve land. It's really about improving your infrastructure so that people can enjoy being outside.
Yeah. That's why pretty much anything at the park is okay because it improves the quality of life. And the office building improves access of residents to what they need, safety features and all
No,
that.
and I think that's what when you had your election on Tuesday, folks came up to me and said, what can we get back to actually having meetings at the township office and in-house meetings? So
there are folks that have a desire, I mean, they love the YouTube, so that's good, but there are some people that actually want to show up.
Right.
So, like you were saying before, Mary,
Yeah.
you know, what we can do to get somebody, you know, in the back room, so we get some of the filing cabinets out here. I mean, I would argue, I hate this rug, I would love to get a new rug, but you can't do that until you get everything else done, so, you know, just to make this place more accessible.
Yeah, I'd love to see that as just a meeting room and not a copy room and a file room and a you name it room. But the whole thing, the whole key, I think the last year we have tried to get a contractor and get a bid, and then we know how much we can do this year, you know, X amount of dollars to close the building off, and then how much inside. But it's been very, very difficult to get a contractor to bid it for all the reasons that are going on, even individually in your own homes. Contractors, the cost of materials, a big question mark. So yeah, it's difficult, but we still have to keep trying.
That's what you were saying, John, you know, how long we can spend it makes a big difference if we get to 2024.
There is a project that we could use to chew up some of this money. I think one of the next major improvements at the park would be to replace all that top lot furniture.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is expensive
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, but
We've been talking about that.
Yeah,
We
that
did,
should be your little pile.
We did improve, we did replace the walking surface, the playing surface.
Yeah.
And that was expensive, that cost us 15,000 or something more, because it's special material and there's underground drains and all. But the furniture and equipment itself is pretty well whipped.
Yeah.
So I talked to Jeff there a while ago to see if he could just start to rough out a list
Well,
of.
John, you've done a tremendous amount of research, you've got the books, you're ready.
Yeah, he has the catalogs, and you're looking at around $100,000 per piece of playground equipment, a nice piece of playground equipment. But yeah, look through the catalogs.
Because what would be great to do with the board's permission would be to work with the pro committee, someone
Right.
from the board if they want, because there are specific pieces of equipment can only go in specific locations because of fault zones. So I've had two companies, one out of Kennett, one out of Maryland, and then one just recently, I think he's around media, would love nothing more than to come out and meet with the pro and us and talk about all that.
Perfect.
They have, there's so many neat things anymore.
So I volunteer for that, I'll work with you on that.
Okay.
I think what we want to do is try to identify a chunk of that spending. It sounds like it's pretty big. And allocate some of this American Rescue Funds, just budget it in there for that.
We could get one.
So if you don't have anything else, that's one approved piece of spending you could do.
Yeah, and I think it's a unique opportunity to put a lot of money into our park that, I mean, think if we didn't have this American Rescue Fund money, that'd be a lot of money would be taken out of our budget. So this is a unique opportunity.
Right.
So Donna,
Yeah, that's a
Sorry.
lot for a contract side.
yeah, Don, I'm just checking. So you'll work with the pro and Jeff to see.
I would have to, actually Jeff and I
Thank you.
started working before, and we, you know, so I have all the books and we've looked at the pieces, but, we didn't have a pro, now we have a pro, we can actually meet with those guys and just
What would
figure
be,
it out.
what would be interesting is some kind of a high spot scope that says, these are the 3 or 4 pieces of equipment we want.
Yeah.
Each one of them costs in and around this amount of money.
Right,
What's that total, what fraction of it do you think we could fund in this budget?
right,
So
that's like.
that's the
So
question,
we have to
not,
create a
not,
plan.
not a detailed thing, say, okay, you got 4 or 5 pieces of equipment.
Right.
What's the high spot cost of each one?
Right,
And if we're limited, we probably will be based on what I hear. As we select some of them and put them in the budget for next year.
Yes.
We have a plan,
Guys,
right? We'll have a
before,
plan.
yeah, before we go on to treasurer, I realize we have not introduced Sarah. And
Oh, right.
it'd be nice if folks can see Sarah's face. Hi, Sarah. And thank you so much for joining us. There we go. We're so glad you joined. Sarah's our part-time secretary / administrative assistant, whatever we want to call it. And Sarah has kids in the charter school, I think, and so it's great to have you join.
Thank you, I'm glad to be here. Oh, we
Can't hide from us.
Oh, you guys are person, I can hide from them.
All right, great. Well, that, do you have what you need, do you think, Melissa?
I think we got enough here. I think, I'll try to work with you this week and see if we can pull some of these things together.
Okay.
And maybe a couple of days, we can pretty much get it
Mhm.
close.
Yep.
Get it close.
What I like is that as a board, we're actually pretty much aligned, so that's good, we're not pulling in two different directions, so.
Yeah. So if we're done with the budget, I guess the only other thing we wanted to discuss was the treasurer,
Township staff update.
township staff, and hiring a treasurer to help Melissa with the worksheet, bookkeeping work she's doing. We had a presentation last Friday by a firm from media, and he sent us the sheet on what the cost would be. Melissa, you've had time to look that sheet over. Can you give the board a sense of where you're at and how many hours you think we would need this treasurer and going forward? I know you think maybe within 6 to 12 months, you'll be down to 5 and most 10 hours a month that you will need this contracted treasurer. Can you give us a sense of that, Melissa?
I believe in the beginning, Pete and I talked last Friday, he's gonna plan on being here, on 1 day a week, a few hours each day, but his plan is to delegate a lot of the work to me and he'll oversee it. So he's hoping to cut his hours down to maybe 5 hours a month.
Okay. And do you see that within a 6 to 12 month period? Does that sound reasonable to you?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think in the beginning, we're gonna basically kind of do a closeout audit almost amongst ourselves to close out one set of books, reopen a new set of books, come up with a new system for the township, and then implement that system. And then he'll just kind of dwindle off his hours down. Still doing all the work, the responsibility, but he'll be delegating a lot of it to me, so now
And then
I'm
overseeing what you're doing to make
Overseeing.
sure, yeah,
correct.
okay.
Melissa, I really like the idea of the closeout on it, I just,
Yeah.
I just think we have to say, this is what was done before you took over. This is, and hopefully everything looks good and everything bounces out, I like that piece of paper that says that, he signs his name.
Mhm.
And then you start and it just gives you
Right.
great. And I wasn't a believer in the beginning, but I think this is a great idea. I
Yeah.
think, even if we keep them for years, I would just to have that set of eyes to back you up and to.
I agree 100%, Donna. An
Yeah.
extra set of eyes on the books, particularly an outside contractor, there's no downside to that. I mean, it is just good for the township watching the money. So going forward then, does the board have to have a vote that we do want to hire this CPA firm in media to come on board and as a private contractor and help Melissa?
So I think that the hiring is just a staff decision, but the appointing them as a treasurer is, well, a board responsibility. I could be wrong about.
I think you're right.
But the board has to appoint a treasurer.
Right.
Like appointing a secretary who's not actually the secretary, so if we have to appoint a treasurer and I would assume that by appointing him as treasurer, we are implying that we'll be hiring him.
Dave, can you create a motion just in
Oh.
your head?
I can, what's
Okay,
the,
and we're gonna-
I need the information.
We're gonna appoint this particular person, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Okay.
let's do the motion.
so Peter Bars. Okay, so I make a motion that the board appoint Peter Bars, CPA, as treasurer for the 2022.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any discussion?
No, but I second it.
I'll second it.
Okay,
So
thanks.
it's on the board.
Okay, thanks, John. Any discussion?
The only thing I would say is, and maybe Melissa or Jeff, can you go through the motions with the insurance company like we had to do with you, Melissa, because we have to have a treasurer bonded, with the insurance company. Can you go ahead and get that started for Peter?
Yes,
Thank you.
He might do it himself.
I
He didn't do it himself. He very well may.
Yeah, what you have to establish is what's the value of the bond.
Right.
And it's probably the same as it was last year, but we probably need to find out what it is. It's really based on how much money you have control over.
Right.
Because at times, we've had to up it, in fact, when we had all that loan money come in for the open space, and we had like a $3.5 million bond at that point. But once that money was dispersed and down, so it varies depending on how much you have, but I think it's fairly constant now. Seems like $1.5 million is the number I remember.
That's correct. I've been in contact with the insurance company and I have his bond paperwork.
Well, this is on top of it, it's already done.
You're right on.
Okay. So then we need to vote.
Any other
Yeah.
discussion?
Yeah, I just want to say for the public's sake that what we pay them is a sliding scale based on the more senior, obviously people cost more, the more junior cost less. So we will work with that to make sure that we're cost efficient. But in many ways, I think what we're doing is priceless because we just have an extra set of very experienced eyes, which is terrific.
I agree.
Okay,
And it makes
so-
you more comfortable, right, Melissa? That's very important.
Absolutely.
There you go.
All right, well, thank you for the discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries 5-0.
Great.
Okay, so what we just need to do is advise him that he's been selected.
I will call
And
him.
start
In
the
fact, I will
process.
text him right now. I'll say, when can you come in?
So I guess we're talking about budget procedure, and I mentioned this before, but I didn't mention it when everyone was on. So this was an election year. We have a new supervisor who will be joining us in January. So that is the one opportunity if Jim is having fits going through and not liking what we're doing. He can open up the books in January if he likes, and we can revisit it. Barring that, books are closed. So.
It's a fairly narrow period, it's only a couple of weeks or something.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah,
6 weeks,
There's
Sean.
everything somewhere about it.
Yeah, the new supervisor has, I
Yeah,
think,
it's
6
right
weeks.
after.
Yeah.
So we can revisit it in January if the new supervisor decides to wants to reopen the budget. All right, I think procedural.
Do we want to talk about this township staff up there, or do we cover that with Sarah? Do we want to get some more detail, most of the title?
So, yeah, I think, so the title now is Office Administrator.
Right.
Township Administrator. So, right, so for the public, we had an executive session last week where we talked about and deliberated about some ideas around how to finalize and restructure the office. The only major change was giving Melissa is now full-time, and their title is Township Administrator. And currently Jeff remains interim manager.
And we have.
And
And
just,
Secretary Sarah.
just a reminder for the public, Melissa is now doing all of our books as well as all of the administrative work that Sharon did. So she has quite a big role.
It's an administrative position.
And Jeff still has his old job, so it's interesting how
Yeah.
you've taken some of the manager's work too. So Melissa has Susan's, what Sharon did, some of what Joan did, other work that you're doing. Jeff has his old job plus the interim manager job.
Right.
It's pretty impressive
Yeah.
that we were able to take 3 full-time people and now we have 2 full-time people doing that work. And that's a great achievement. And part of the reason why we went to the office structure the way it is, it's not like you're twiddling your thumbs on Fridays and when the office is closed. You guys are very, very busy doing the work that needs to get done. And now with Sarah here, so we need some more help. So the phone's not constantly ringing and you can't do what you have to do.
And we have, in emergencies, we have an emergency line. So
Right.
it's not like when the township is the concept here is, if there's an emergency, the township is still available to the residents. It's really about workflow and being able to do more during those downtimes, so.
Also, we're in a transition from a particular office structure to something that's completely different, so the office hour change was to try to lighten some of the load on the staff while we work through this transition. Certainly, it looks like it's gonna work well, but we'll have to see how it works over time. Somebody may find that, somebody's overloaded and may have to make some adjustments, but it looks like a pretty good structure right now, so.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't know if the public remembers, but it was several months ago that we actually worked with a third party to help us with increasing the efficiency of the office. And we probably didn't get exactly what we wanted out of that, but I think on our own, we were able to get to a more efficient structure that, hopefully that's what we have now. And I think you make a good point, John. There's some of this is still a transition. We don't have it all figured out, but we feel good about it. But if the public has some concerns, or if they feel that their needs aren't being met, just please contact us and let us know. We're open to feedback. We do want to continue to get better, but this is an opportunity with a different management structure, different way of working. Different office hours, different personnel, that we hope that we can still bring you what you need to be successful, and we can be successful at a lower overall cost.
Right, and I think too, Donna, we should note that before we made all these changes, we investigated most of the surrounding townships and their office hours and their structure to try and, so that we could come to the best decision possible. Hopefully we're at that point, but it may need to be tweaked, which is fine. And I agree, I'd like to hear input if something isn't working, but our staff said that hour or two in the morning gives them an opportunity to think, get work done without worrying about the door, someone coming in the door or the phone ringing. And they rarely come in before 10 a.m. anyway. So we really haven't changed anything for the residents in that sense. Having Friday closed will give Melissa, I think, an opportunity to do the all-important bookwork, and Jeff the opportunity to meet with contractors and all that other work he has to do outside the office. So we're as you said, we're truly hoping that we hit the sweet spot, but we'll see. We'll tweak it if we need to.
Mary, just additive to that, we looked at all the surrounding townships,
right,
and their populations and other factors related to service to the community. And with the office hours we established, we're in line with most of the townships that are surrounding us for our size and our budget size and the population of the township. So I think it was a good selection, and I think it will work out well.
I agree, John. A change is difficult always, but when you get used to it, you realize this was the way to go. This was the right thing to do. So hopefully that's going to be our end result. Okay. Is there any other business we have to talk about?
So we have budget discussions done, township update, discussion regarding position of township treasurer, and now we have public comment.
So
Yes, any comments out there in the general public?
Yeah, so I would ask the general public to go first, but then I have a comment that I would like to make.
Who was that who was just talking? I'm sorry.
So it's Donna D.
Oh, Donna, sorry.
Yeah, we have 3 members of the public, or 4 members of the public on the line. If anybody, I would ask them to talk first, and then I'll.
So
Okay. It's open to the public, please.
any comments or questions? Suggestions?
We have all 3 of our auditors online, so.
Can they talk? Are they able to?
Well, they can
Oh, they're
hear,
muted.
they
So
can
they
hear us,
don't
but
have
they're
any-
muted.
they might not have
Okay.
Yeah, just unmute yourself and identify yourself, and away we go.
Looks like.
I'll just say, we can all hear you, but I don't think we have any comments.
Okay, great. All right, so I do have a comment. Mary, this is, my comment is to you and to the whole board, but it is directed at you, Mary. So I'm gonna respectfully ask you to consider resigning from chair of the board. And the reason why I'm making this request is because I was made aware of an email or a message or a public website, some kind of communication that went out to the public that contained information that we talked about in an exec session. It contained salary information for our staff that was discussed in exec session because it is their personal information and it shouldn't have been shared with the public. In addition, you had requested to share that particular communication with the public, and we as a board had asked you not to do that. I just, for the life of me, don't understand why you did it, but it's totally inappropriate, was unfair to our staff. And because of that, I have lost confidence in you as the chair. In addition to that, and I'm glad our auditors are on the line, I thought your behavior at the last board meeting was totally inappropriate with the comments you made regarding Fred. It just was, I'll just stop with inappropriate. So as I said, I respectfully ask that you resign as chair, and you need to think about that. But if you choose not to, then I want to give you the heads up that I plan to introduce a motion at our next board meeting to ask the board to consider removing you as chair. So open to your comments.
All right, Donna, I heard you. Any other comments?
No, but I do think it's not the greatest idea to introduce a resolution next month when Mary's position ends we revote at the beginning of next year for who the chair will be.
Yeah, but I think under normal circumstances, Nancy, you would be totally correct. But I think what's happened with the sharing of confidential information of our staff publicly is just the bar. It's what we need to do something. It's not something that we can wait 2 months for. So. I don't know if anybody else on the board has a comment, but I want to say thank you.
I agree with your comments, Don.
If I can just add, over my 4 years, I have found that we haven't always followed all the laws, and that has not been something that the chair has been held responsible for. So I know that from a social, public perspective, it was a very difficult meeting. But from a township well-being, I don't think there was harm done.
Well, yeah, I would disagree with that, Nancy. I think when you publicly attack residents and you make it personal, this wasn't hey, I disagree with your point of view. It was, I question your competency. It was a personal attack. So while I understand you can have a heated argument and voices can get raised, this was something that sounded like it was a personal attack, not a professional disagreement. And I think I want to echo what Donna said is, we have a board for a reason, and that's so we don't have someone go off and be a cowboy, and when they don't disagree with something, they necessarily make it public, particularly in such a way that she did it. And what was presented was inaccurate, right? So one of the reasons why we didn't want this public, or I didn't want that letter written, was it contained inaccuracies, right? And it sounded like, and so instead of saying, hey, what can we do to rewrite this to make it make sense, which is the optimal choice to reduce, as Mary pointed, talk in the township, she chose maybe the worst possible way to get her message out there. So instead of working with the board and saying, hey, how can we move forward? It was, well, I want my way, so I'm going to get it. And I'm going to use exec session.
Let's just.
So what I'm saying is that means what other things can we now not trust Mary with? And as soon as you ask that question, I can't have confidence in her as chair.
Yeah, I'm not making excuses, but Dave, when that email first came out from Mary through Jeff, No one said, let's rework it. You said this is absolutely terrible and blah, blah, blah. But no one said, hey, we're a board. Let's look at the kernel of the idea and let's work with it.
Jeff did, he did rework it. What Jeff put out for the advertising for the meeting was perfect. Jeff, you did, it was you wrote a paragraph that described what we would be talking about at today's meeting.
Correct,
And
that
it
was an
was-
advertisement.
And it was.
Right, but I don't know if we're talking about the same thing. Before, when Mary wanted this published on the website and before it went different channels, Jeff sent it out to us for our comments. And I think as a board, we could have said, hey, I'm not comfortable with this as it's written, but
Yeah,
your
and
goal of hold on,
I'll-
Dave, just hold on. But your goal of transparency, I respect, and maybe we can find a different way to do this. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, I can read verbatim my response to the board if you'd like. And nowhere do I say I am not open to a letter updating the township. It's that, I think you're mischaracterizing my response. But that be.
Why
be
don't
that
you read it,
as may.
Dave? Feel free to read it if that helps.
Sure, I can if anyone wants me to. So regarding the email, I said, I don't think this is an appropriate message. The basics of all this information are on the website already, and the detailed decision-making has been expressed in meetings and our meeting minutes. Talking about conspiracy theories and how some of the board feels is not appropriate. This reads like Mary is speaking on behalf of herself and not the board. The township website is not a pulpit for one supervisor's personal feelings. I don't think that means slam the door, we're not going to put any board sponsored notes up on the website. I don't think that implies that at all. I mean, what I'm clearly saying is this is one supervisor's message to the community.
Yeah.
Right, and so that's simply the case, like whether or not, so I disagree with your statement that I was.
I understand, and that's fair. I just, in the future, I think we can all do a better job of supporting each other.
I agree, and I think that the first thing we can do is make a change at our chair. Because I don't think we should be rewarding this is not, this isn't month one of being a chair. This is, we've been around this, so.
So I mean, I'm planning, Mary, it falls on your court. If you resign, then we'll, in next meeting, we'll appoint a new chair. If you choose not to resign, then we'll have a motion and we'll vote and see how the vote goes. I think you have a sense of how the vote might go. And then we'll take a move, but yeah, I feel very strong. I feel strongly as they do. And it's more for our staff. I mean, it's to put someone's wages on a public note, and everybody in the public knows exactly how much someone's getting paid.
Well, Donna, don't they know that every month in the treasurer's report? I mean,
Not necessarily, no. No, they don't have I mean, they can.
Yeah, they do. They know every deduction.
It would be very difficult to figure that. So
No, it wouldn't, Donna. Donna, open any treasurer's report, and it shows the paycheck, the start, all the deductions, and then the net pay stuff. I mean, I see that every month in the treasurer's report.
It's just, as I said, that's why we have an exec session to have that in a confidential form, not to sit there and put it out with that. It was inappropriate. It was so inappropriate. I can't even get this started. I don't think there's anything else to say. Thank you.
Well, I don't want to go on and on about this. This wasn't part of this meeting, but I just want to say, what a small community we live in. We know how, I mean, they're talking about this at the post office, for heaven's sake. And they are conspiracy theory. That was not intended that the board has, it was the opposite of what I did. That's what is going around. So how do you stop that? You tell people, here's what we're doing. And I just feel like we never have a right to not tell the people what we're doing, especially if we're spending their money. And that was the intention. And I don't know, I would have loved it if you would have said, Mary, how about if we do it this way? How about if we tell the public this way? But you didn't. You all jumped on me both feet, which, okay, you did what you did.
So as his chair, you could have come back to us and said, okay, here you don't like this approach, how about this approach? I mean, You could have taken the leadership role too. You just do not turn it around, give it to.
I haven't had
And it's-
a lot of good feedback trying that approach. So that's maybe why.
Well, then, but the last thing you do is give it to a third party and have them put it on the website the way, no, it's just, Mary, step back. It's just so wrong. It's just so wrong.
All
in so
right,
many-
I hear you, Donna.
All right, you know, I'm always a glass half full. I mean, this meeting was a joy to that. I'm sorry I had to do what I did, but I thought this 2 hours that we spent together today was a joy. We worked so well together. And, I wish we could do this all the time. It was a beautiful meeting. Hopefully we get better in the future. So, I'm gonna hold on to that we know we can work together when we wanna work together. And hopefully with new leadership, that it will happen more often than not.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, I guess if there's no more comments, let's close this meeting. 2:49.